Hey guys, Ken Smith Fishing. So this is going to be part 4 of my conversation with John Findeisen, who is the fisheries biologist over aquatic invasive species for Texas Park and Wildlife. And today he's going to talk to us about some work they're doing, trying to figure out. So they went over and they pulled some basically sediment bottom, if you will, out of Toledo Bend, and they're trying to figure out why that grass isn't growing back, to see if there's something in the soil, something going on, and they're going to compare it to other places. Well, he'll tell you what they're going to do, but I found this really interesting. There's one part left after this. It'll probably be up next week. So by the way, I'm getting to do something this weekend I hadn't done in a long time. We're going to Rayburn, and I'm not pre-fishing for anything. I'm going fun fishing. So I am going to sneak something in for you guys. I'm going to fish Friday for fun. Looking for some fish. Saturday, we're going to get out in a Vexus metal boat. So we're going to do a Vexus metal boat review. And then Sunday morning, if we don't get blown away, Mr. Hawthorne and I are going to take out his 2014 Triton metal boat. Now, I'm doing this one a little different because you remember when I did the glass boats review search, which if you've never seen them, they're right there. I only looked at boats that were in current production. And, I had guys ask me to do Legends and some other boats that aren't in current production. And I didn't do them because I knew I was looking to buy a new boat. In this case, when I buy a metal boat, I might buy a used boat. And I'm really curious. So that boat's going to be, 8 years old. I'm really curious to see kind of how that boat's held up structurally. So I'm looking forward to doing that too. Again, assuming the wind forecast is a little bit sketchy for Sunday, but we're for sure going to get some Friday fishing in and some Saturday fishing in. So we should get a Rayburn report from a non-pressured Ken Smith just down there fun fishing. I might even holler at my buddy Brian Brano and see if he wants to sneak out Friday. And then we'll do the Vexus review on Saturday. We might even fish a little bit Saturday afternoon, and then hopefully we'll do the Triton review on Sunday. So stay tuned next week. We'll try to have some boat reviews up, 10 boat reviews for you guys. And I got to tell you, I also so Zach is the general manager of the Office Depot on Central Expressway here in Plano. And he's a subscriber. He actually recognized me a year ago. This was so strange, with a mask on in the Office Depot shopping for a scanner. And he asked me, we're just talking. He goes, by the way, have you decided what boat to buy? And I'm like, what? He goes, I know who you are. I had to talk to you for a minute to hear your voice. But I saw him today. I was over there buying $300 worth of toner. And he said they're biting at Hawkins too. So, and I've had Hawkins on my mind. I got some great memories out of Lake Hawkins from my club fishing with the Dallas hook setters back in the 80s. 2 lakes are really kind of on my list this spring that I want to get to, and will do my best to get to. Caddo, which you've heard me talk about a bunch, and I'd love to get over to the Wood County lakes, and Hawkins would be top on my list. He said there was already fish spawning over there on that last warm front, which does not surprise me at all. So we got that coming up. We got that new transducer coming from Garmin for the live scope forward looking. We should have one of those hopefully in the next few weeks. And by the way, I've already mentioned that the guys at Jones will have a bunch of those. And just a lot of fun stuff. We're finally getting back to doing some fishing. And then we've got back-to-back bass champs tournament on Cedar Creek at the beginning of next month, which is only a couple of weeks away. So we'll get over to Cedar Creek and do a little practicing as well. So stick around. Gosh, I talked a long time there. I didn't mean to, but let's go check out my conversation with John.
All right, I sidetracked you. So back to my original question. You guys pulled some of the soil out of the Bend.
Right.
Tell us what you found, and tell us what about it puzzled you.
When we went in to Todd was going to do some of his tracking stuff, and I gave him a bucket and a shovel and asked if he would bring me a bucket of
hey, bring me a shovel of dirt, would you?
Yeah, exactly. Bring me a bucket of dirt from the bottom of Toledo Bend. And Todd was gracious enough to do it. So we have some screens that we can, various sizes that we can filter. There's like a filter. So we started filtering all this stuff. And what we were looking for with these tubers and pterions, the potatoes and the, what looks like a small pine cone, were these present in the soil? And they had roughly about a wash tub size hole in a 5-gallon bucket, probably 2/3, 3/4 the way full. And we found 2 tubers in it. I have the tubers.
Hydrilla tubers.
Yes, hydrilla tubers. The best we can tell, they're hydrilla tubers. and they're sitting in a aquarium, just a small plastic aquarium in that same sediment in my windowsill. And I've been keeping water on it. We're not seeing any growth out of it. So, I question the fact now, are these tubers viable? And it just, it's kind of puzzling. So, we found 2 tubers. We didn't find any of the turions. So
What's
Todd and I've been
turion?
talking. That's the one that grows between the stem and the stalk and the stem. It'll grow in that little area in there, and that's another way the hydrilla can reproduce. That's why I went into the reproduction part of it whenever you asked. So we're looking at that. Well, we didn't find a whole lot, so now we have an instrument. I had to get an extension for it so that we can actually take substrate samples in deeper water. But we're going to start taking substrate samples and looking at tubers and turions in lake bottoms from Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, Lake Fork, and then we're going to go to these lakes like Pinkston and Lake Nacogdoches, where we have lots of tubers and turions, and start making that comparison. Are we not seeing? Why are we not seeing the hydrilla regrowth at Toledo Bend? We've had great opportunity for it to happen here recently, and
Right.
it just happened. So is it because there's no tubers and turions in there, or is it another reason? Now, the one thing I can tell you, fishing with the high school kids this weekend over at Toledo Bend is, we did find some hydrilla starting to grow back in housing.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So
what kind of depth?
it was shallow enough. I mean, we were getting it with Fritzides, but it's 6 to 7 inches long and bright green. So
what temperature does it really accelerate its growth rate at?
That's going to be starting in the 70s. I mean, we're talking a subtropical plant here from South America, similar to the Salvinia itself, and you'll start seeing that growth. Hydrilla can grow up to 3 inches a day in ideal conditions.
Yeah, I knew it. I didn't know it was that fast, but I knew it was really, really
right.
fast.
I would think, at that fast, you could probably almost watch it grow.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what is confusing then is, if there are the tubers from prior to the great flood at Toledo Bend, why in the world haven't they rooted in pretty much ideal conditions the last couple of summers, and the hydrilla shown back up?
Right. That's what we're trying to figure out. Yeah. Why is that? What do our tuber numbers look like? Maybe it's because we had so much sediment come in. Did we get a lot of sedimentation on the bottom itself, or the soft sediment that used to be on the bottom of Toledo Bend, did that get flushed out because of the current? It's hard to believe 180,000 acre lake could have current in it, but when you're releasing, almost 250,000 cubic feet of water per second, something has to move in there. So is that getting flushed? So maybe, rather than maybe the opposite happened, where that silt and sediment, the loose sediment was on top, typically what everybody's going to call mud, got washed and flushed. And now what we're left with is a harder, sandier substrate.
Yeah. You made a comment to me in our first call about an area where somebody had made an observation about the bottom composition changing, right?
Right, exactly. I don't remember exactly where it was. It was an angler that, had these exact same concerns. And there was a spot out in the middle of the lake that, when in the summertime, they would take the kids and they could get out and walk. And he said, it was kind of soft and mucky. And he said, now you go out there and it's like, concrete. So, and it may be so that it's so hard that plant just doesn't have the ability to shoot through it.
Well, look, if the lake is muddy when you have high water, it's because the sediment's been picked up, right? I mean,
exactly.
It's not hard to figure out.
Right. So, is that sediment being washed in? Is it sediment being picked up from the lake? It's probably both.
Probably a lot of both. Yeah. All right. Let's see what else I had made notes here we want to talk about. It appears that Rayburn is going to recover pretty good this year. Would you agree, hydrilla wise?
Yeah, I mean, based on what I've seen now, it seems like the hydrilla is limited though. From Five Fingers up to Norris, Coleman, you go into Veach, then shoot across over to Caney, and then come back down. Whereas was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Bird Island and the back end of Harvey. But before that, it was above the 147 bridge, And when was it? We had the first flood, several years ago. I think it came up 10 feet. After that flood, we haven't seen hydrilla above. There's a little bit around Monterey, but it's not much.
Right.
But
Actually, right around the boat ramp.
yeah, exactly. And then the outside, as you start to go, what is that, west or kind of northwest, there's a little bit that's been hanging out from the shoreline there.
But again, you're going to see fragmentation.
Sure.
Guys are going to run from Caney. It's going to be hooked around their ladder. They're going to fish in the canyons or in the pier stand, and it's going to grow back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it should come back. Now, however, we're set up now. What is it? Rayburn is 3.5 feet low. We know that 3.5 feet of water wiped out all the hydrilla at Toledo Creek.
Sure. Yeah.
Hopefully the lake will come up, but when it does, it'll come up slow. Excuse me.
Yeah, if you can get 3 inches of growth a day, maybe if it comes up, an inch a week, you never ever it actually helps it grow.
Sure. And that's the thing that Todd and I've been talking about, the advantage of these lakes being down right now. If they'll stay down for a while, then we'll get that hydrilla continue to push out. So, what may be 10 feet deep here, whenever the lake's full, completely full, now we're at 14.5 feet deep.
Got it. So you made a comment in an email when you and I were going back and forth about the introduction of salt water. What were you talking about there?
Right. There's been some stuff on the internet, about why doesn't Parks and Wildlife spray things with salt water or use something else, other than an herbicide. Well, we can't. It's illegal. The Environmental Protection Agency, as part of the, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA.
Okay.
That all pesticides, group all of that together as pesticides. In order for that to be used in the United States, it has to be registered by the Environmental Protection Agency. So in order to be registered, you have to do a lot of research. EPA is not going to just let any chemical go out and used to kill something, whether it's a plant or an animal or something like that. There's going to have to be testing done. Typically that testing and the reports can take anywhere from 12 to 15 years to be done. The last one that was completed was done in about 8 years, but it was a terrestrial herbicide that was then allowed to be used in aquatics. I'll get into that in a minute, but it took 8 years to do that, all of the research required by EPA, and somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, $225 million. So, it's not like we just go and get, a chemical off the shelf and spray it. It has to be registered by EPA. In addition to that, the label has to be approved by EPA. So, that's all the application rates, your personal protective equipment that you have to wear, as well as any restrictions on water use. That could be drinking water, irrigation, swimming, fishing, stuff like that. All of that has to be researched and then put into that label. So once the EPA then approves that label, then that label becomes federal law. So applying an herbicide outside of that label, if let's say it's, for salvinia, a half gallon per acre is what's recommended. If you do 3/4 of a gallon per acre, if a little's good, a lot's better, you're in violation of federal law on that. So that's why, we can't use things like salt water, because it's not approved by EPA as an herbicide. We have a surfactant, a soap that we use to help transfer the herbicide into the plant, that if you use it at a high enough rate, it'll prevent the salvinia from floating. It'll actually sink the salvinia and kill it. But we can't use it because it's registered as a surfactant and not an herbicide. So, and it's kind of interesting too. I've seen a few things on the internet too about, well, why doesn't Parks and Wildlife or the Corps, whoever, find an herbicide that's just for salvinia? Well, that doesn't exist right now. Parks and Wildlife actually helped do some research funding out of Stephen F. Austin State University with Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee was looking at salvinia to a cure for pancreatic cancer. It was showing some good positive results to it. But Dr. Lee had also noticed that in some of his salvinia, holding tanks, it was beginning to die, and he was trying to figure out what it was. Well, he had done some work on his doctoral dissertation in China, looking at why I forget what plant it was. It was a tree, why it had died. And they got to figuring out that it was what they call an indicide. And it's a chemical that our bodies use in very small amounts to regulate certain things, to turn things on and off, like puberty. You start going through that change, your body is creating the hormones and chemicals for us to mature as a human, and then eventually that quits. So there's a switch that turns it on and a switch that turns it off. Those things are often referred to as secondary metabolites. So that's what Dr. Lee was looking at was is my salvinia dying from an indicide? And the indicide is that secondary metabolite. In normal levels, it does what it's supposed to. It's a switch, turn stuff on, turn stuff off. In a little higher concentration, it can be cause mutations. And then he found that in even higher concentrations, it can kill that organism. So what he was finding was that he identified two compounds. Well, he identified several compounds in salvinia that could kill it. And each plant has enough indicide in it to kill not only itself, but other plants around. And what he initially was doing was taking salvinia, putting it in some type of compactor, compressing it, harvesting that juice, and then spraying that juice out over the top of the salvinia, and it was dying within hours. So we were maybe it had every indication that was going to be the silver bullet for it. As he began to tease out some of these compounds in there, we found out that two of them were already being manufactured. One of them is a food additive that's being made here in the United States. So that was one of the things we were like, okay, if this is already being manufactured, we know it's will kill salvinia. He started looking at the trials of it. Yes, it worked. It killed the salvinia. It did really well. But the bad thing was it was hard to keep that molecule in solution, dissolved in the water. Now you could do it by heating the water. So we were actually looking at starting to modify some of our tanks. But what stopped all of this was we can't use that as an herbicide because it hasn't gone through the registration process with EPA, for it to be a registered herbicide and then have a label on it. Right now, SFA has the patent on all of that. And I'm not sure where they're going, if they're working with EPA at this point now to get that, into, production as far as an herbicide, but, that could be a game changer for us.
Is he still looking at salvinia as a potential cure?
As far as I know, Dr. Lee has now gone back to China. He retired from SFA, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, and we haven't heard from him since. So.
Okay.
All right. Sorry I went on and on at the start there, but that's my conversation with John. I got one more part of that, and I'll probably get that up. I'm going to guess probably next Thursday. But we'll be back on Tuesday, probably with the Rayburn report. And then we'll get those 10 boat reviews up for y'all over the next few weeks. We might even go to 3 videos a week for a few weeks since we're going to have a lot of footage to edit and to go through. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope I bump into some of you guys on Rayburn this weekend. I'm not easy to miss. Big black bass cats, Spark Energy, and 6 Cents, and a bunch of other stuff down the side of it. So if you see me, please say hello. Thanks, guys.